Anna was 9 years old when she first traveled with her parents to India. Her father had been invited to a cultural exchange at a university in Delhi, and her mother thought it would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for their daughter. For Anna, whose world until then had been confined to school corridors and the quiet suburbs of England, the trip was like stepping into another planet. The air smelled of spices and smoke. Markets pulsed with color. Tuk-tuks darted like dragonflies. And beyond the cities stretched landscapes that seemed too vast, too ancient, to belong to the same world as her neighborhood playground. One morning, they visited a wildlife sanctuary near the edge of a dense jungle. The guide, a soft-spoken man named Arjun, told stories of elephants, giants that remembered kindness, that mourned their dead, that carried the wisdom of centuries in their eyes. Anna listened wide-eyed, clutching her small notebook as if she could somehow write down the majesty of these animals. Then, as the group walked along a dusty trail, a commotion stirred near the riverbank. Arjun frowned and hurried forward. Anna followed close behind, curiosity tugging her like a rope. There, half collapsed near the water, lay a baby elephant. Its grey hide was marred by scratches. Its left ear bore a strange white marking, like a crescent moon brushed by careless paint. The calf trumpeted weakly, struggling to rise. "Poacher's snare," Arjun muttered, kneeling to examine the wound on its leg. "They set traps near the river. This one escaped, but barely." Anna's mother gasped, urging her back. But Anna stepped forward. The elephant's eyes caught hers, huge, liquid, filled with terror yet pleading. She knelt in the mud, ignoring her mother's protest, and whispered, "It's okay. You're safe now." She took the bottle of water she'd been carrying, unscrewed the cap, and carefully tilted it. The calf's trunk, trembling, reached toward her. When it touched the plastic, Anna's breath caught. Slowly, clumsily, the elephant drank. Arjun and the sanctuary staff moved quickly, bringing ropes and a stretcher to lift the calf. But Anna remained there, her small hand resting against the calf's rough skin. "You're going to live," she whispered fiercely, as if sheer willpower could seal the wound. "I promise." When the men hoisted the elephant onto the stretcher, it cried out, trunk reaching. Anna ran alongside, tears streaking her dusty face. The calf lifted its head one last time and flapped the ear with the white crescent mark, as though imprinting itself into her memory. That night, Anna couldn't sleep. She replayed the scene over and over, the touch of the trunk, the crescent mark on the ear, the way it had looked at her, as if memorizing her as much as she memorized it. When she returned home weeks later, her friends asked about palaces and tigers, about food and markets. She told them only one story, about a baby elephant with a moon on its ear. And deep inside, she believed their paths would cross again. 15 years later, Anna landed in Delhi with a work badge on her lanyard and a weariness in her bones that coffee could not cure. She was 24 now, a junior field producer for a documentary outfit that specialized in human-wildlife conflict. The company sent her ahead of the crew to scout locations, chase permits, and make impossible phone calls sound easy. On the third day, a colleague forwarded a lead. A sanctuary on the edge of the Satpura Range was piloting a coexistence corridor, reforesting an ancient migration path so elephants could move safely between fragmented habitats. The email had a name attached, Arjun Singh, head ranger. The past rose like heat off tarmac. When she called, a familiar voice answered, older, steadier, carrying the same careful kindness. "You were a child," Arjun said after a pause that felt like memory arranging itself. "You gave water to a calf, by the river. You cried when we lifted him." "I was 9, Anna said, laughing softly at her younger self. "I remember his ear. A white crescent, like a painted moon." "Come," Arjun said simply. "We'll show you what the years have done." The road to the sanctuary stitched through farmland and teak forest, past mustard fields the color of new sunlight and villages that smelled of wood smoke and coriander. She rode in the back of a rattling jeep, cradling her notebook, while a driver named Rofi told her elephant stories in fragments. Crops raided at midnight, grandmothers who left bowls of millets at the edge of fields to pay respect, bulls that learned which gates were unlatched and which men were kind. At the sanctuary gate, Arjun waited in a sun-bleached cap. Lines webbed the corners of his eyes in the way of men who spend their patience on other people's panic. He embraced her without embarrassment. "Welcome back, little water-bearer," he said. They walked past the clinic, whitewashed walls, neat shelves, the clean medicine smell she remembered, then through an educational center where children pressed their noses to glass cases of beetles and seeds. Beyond, the forest opened like a secret told again. "We don't keep the elephants penned," Arjun said. "Only the injured or orphaned. Most are wild, moving through. We monitor, mitigate, assist. Teach villagers how to store grain, build chilly fences, keep distance. We try to give elephants the dignity of choice." "And the calf?" Anna asked before she could pretend detachment. "From that day." Arjun smiled, the private kind that men wear when they're about to share a good story. "He stayed a season in care. He learned to use his leg again. Then we released him to a small matriarchal herd that had lost a juvenile. They accepted him like rain." A breath Anna hadn't realized she'd been holding let itself go. "Does he still pass through?" "Sometimes," Arjun said. "Some years we don't see him at all, then he appears as if he never left." He stopped beside a map pinned with colored strings. He'd be fully grown now. Hard to tell which is which unless you know their stories. He tapped a photograph. "But this one we know. We call him Chandra, moon." The photograph showed an elephant in late afternoon light, dust shimmering around him like gold confetti. His left ear bore a pale crescent. Anna touched the glossy paper as if it could be warm. "May I see him?" she asked. Arjun spread his hands. "If he wants to be seen." They spent the afternoon riding boundary tracks, trail cameras winking from sal trees. Anna scribbled notes about corridor width and crop compensation schemes, how 30 families had switched from rice to chili because elephants disliked the taste, how schoolchildren on bicycles learned to stop and wait if the forest gave certain signals. She recorded Arjun's patient answers, the way he never pretended certainty, how he said we are learning more often than we know. That night she slept in a stilted hut for visiting researchers, the darkness loud with frogs. Once, some deep-bellied sound vibrated the boards and she sat up so fast her head spun. Silence returned, layered and alive. She dreamed, of course she dreamed, of a calf drinking from a plastic bottle, of a pale moon on an ear, of a promise spoken by a child who thought promises were spells. At dawn, they found fresh prints at the river, rounded, pad-soft edges pressed into damp sand, big as dinner plates, crossed by smaller tracks. "A family unit," Arjun said. "Moving east." He knelt, measuring stride with his hand. One adult male lagging behind. Could be a bull shadowing the herd. Or an old uncle who likes to supervise. They followed until the light climbed and the prints dissolved where the bank turned to rock. Somewhere out there, a forest breathed around bodies the size of rooms, and Anna felt a kind of gratitude that hurt. Her phone buzzed with city messages, deadlines, budgets, the language of small fires. She silenced it. Arjun tilted his head, listening to a frequency she could not hear, then said, "We'll try the hill track by dusk. Elephants like the cool." The day split itself into kindly hours. Anna filmed village women pounding chilies with salt and garlic to paste along fences, their laughter rising like birds. She sat with a farmer named Satish, who once slept on his field with a flashlight and woke to a shadow swallowing the moon. "I thought it was the end," he said, pouring her tea the color of caramel. But he was gentle. He looked at me, and I felt like a child. I said, "Baba, forgive, take what you need." He ate only 1 sack of rice, not 2. That is mercy. He grinned, revealing a missing tooth. "Now I plant chilies. We both sleep better." At the ranger station, Arjun's radio crackled, a disturbance near the old teak cutting road. Gunshots heard, a motorcycle abandoned. His jaw tightened. "Poachers," he said softly, as if telling a secret to the ground. He summoned 2 field teams. "You stay," he told Anna. "I'll be back by dusk." "I won't be a liability," Anna said, surprising herself. "Let me at least trail behind with Rofi. I won't get in the way." Arjun hesitated, weighing responsibility against something else. Trust, perhaps, or the knowledge that people are braver when they are allowed to witness the thing they love. He nodded once. "Distance," he said. Obey at once. No heroics. The forest is older than our pride. They drove until the road forgot how to be a road. Rofi killed the engine and the world filled with insect prayer. They walked single file along a narrow track, eyes soft, not stabbing, the way Arjun had taught, let movement reveal itself. A hornbill clattered past, prehistoric and scandalized. Monkeys heckled from a high banyan like gossiping aunties. Near a bend, Rofi raised a hand. Halt. Voices. Male, rushed, low. The sound of metal against wood. Then the abrupt, silencing thud of fear. Arjun cupped his hands and called in a tone that wasn't quite speech, wasn't quite song. Brothers. Another ranger answered from the other side with the same not song. The human voices scattered like quail flushed from grass. A motorcycle failed to start, then started, then screamed away. Branches sighed where bodies had hurried through. The rangers moved in a practice crescent, checking for snares. Anna followed at a respectful distance, notebook forgotten. Twice she reached to touch the charm at her throat, an old brass coin her grandmother had pressed into her palm, for luck, for return. They found the snare half buried near a game trail, wicked and patient. Arjun knelt and dismantled it with the tenderness of a midwife. He placed the wire in a sack. We'll log it and burn the rest, he said. They'll set more. We'll pull more. This is a conversation that tires me. By the time the light went honeysoft, they had found 3 more. No blood. Anna took inventory photographs with hands that shook anyway. On the way back, Rofi took a longer loop to avoid a washout. The jeep bounced, sighed, clattered its old complaints. Around the next bend, a cow-elephant stood in the road with a calf against her foreleg, ears out like sails. Rofi braked so gently even the air hesitated. The matriarch tasted them with her trunk, dust, diesel, human hearts beating. She decided they were not a problem. She stepped aside with the vast courtesy of those who do not fear small things. Behind her, in the deepening shade, a shape detached itself from the forest, a large bull, alone, deliberate. He bore the dusty gold of evening along his back. As he turned his head, the left ear flicked against a branch, and the light caught on it in a pale curve. Anna's mouth went dry. She felt the old river bank on her knees, warm plastic in her hand, a trunk trembling toward water. Rofi whispered, "Shall I?" "No," she said, barely sound. "Please. Let him choose." The bull studied the jeep the way a scientist studies an anomaly. He did not make a show of power. He did not come closer than he needed. He held them with a gaze that went under the skin. Then he lifted his trunk and drew the air past his Jacobson's organ, tasting meaning. Maybe it was the hint of clinic iodine lingering in Anna's hair, or the turmeric on her cuffs from the women pounding paste, or the coincidence that sometimes feels like a plan. Maybe it was the thing itself, the part of an elephant's mind that keeps a ledger of tenderness. He stepped toward her side of the open jeep, unhurried, every footfall a sentence. Anna forgot fear because something older than fear stood up in her. She lifted her hand, palm out, the exact way a 9-year-old had once done without instruction. The bull lowered his head until the crescent-marked ear was a flag above her. His trunk hovered a breath from her fingers. Every fine hair on it stood like grass in wind. "Chandra," she said, and her voice broke around the name. "Moon." He touched her palm, once, and the contact burned through 15 years like dry paper. The world narrowed to this: rough velvet skin, hot air, the delicate prehensile tip that could pluck a single berry, the patient power of a creature that could lift a log and chose to lift trust instead. Rofi made a sound, the kind men make when they see their childhood walking toward them. The matriarch huffed, satisfied. The calf blinked and memorized how to be unafraid. Then, as if he had ticked a box only he could see, the bull lifted away, turned with grace that mocked his size, and followed the herd into trees. Anna did not cry then. She held herself still as a pond. Only when the forest swallowed the last grey flank did she bow her head and let the tears arrive like overdue monsoon. 2 days later, the crew reached the sanctuary, a cameraman with shoulders like scaffolding, a sound recordist who named her microphones, a director who could make a bureaucrat laugh. They set up interviews with Panchayat leaders, filmed Arjun explaining corridor maps with a stick in wet sand. Anna felt a lightness in her chest that didn't come from accomplishment alone. She caught herself smoothing her hair before each drive, as if the forest could see her. Trouble came at noon on the fourth day, when the heat poured at everything and even cicadas sounded tired. A distant pop echoed from the western buffer, then another. The radio spat coordinates. A ranger's voice said, tight with breath, "Smoke." "Poachers again?" the director asked, already measuring the story for drama. Arjun had his hand to his ear, listening past static. "No," he said. "Farmers burning stubble." Wind shifted. "It's running for the teak." They packed water, beaters, first aid kits. "We go in to help the line," Arjun said. "We stay clear of the drainages. Fire likes to climb." He looked to Anna. "You don't follow me. You follow Rofi. You stop when he stops." They reached the fire edge as it wrote itself across dry grass with red pens. Volunteers formed a ragged line, beating flames with green branches, coughing, swearing, laughing with nerves. Smoke flattened the world to two colors, orange and intent. Somewhere a peacock yelled insults at God. "Watch the wind," Rofi said in her ear. "If it turns, we turn." It turned. What had been a manageable flank heaved up and shouldered sideways. Men shouted to one another in a chorus of names. The director yelled something about coverage. The cameraman coughed, eyes streaming, and kept rolling. "Back!" Arjun's voice cut through the noise, clean as a blade. "To the jeep. Move." They moved. Fire has a speed that makes mockery of legs. It came shouldering down a slope, found a tangle of fallen bark, and began to think of itself as large. The path to the jeep narrowed with heat. On the track, a motorcycle lay on its side, a fresh scar in the dust where its rider had gone down. A boy, 20 at most, stumbled toward them with a limp and a face that had forgotten childhood. "My uncle," he said, and pointed blindly toward smoke. He was cutting ahead. Rofi shook his head hard. "We cannot." "We can," Anna said, and surprised herself again. "Show me where." Arjun appeared at her shoulder like a reprimand conjured. He followed her gaze into the mess and did the arithmetic only seasoned rangers know. Time, wind, distance, human error, the hunger of flame. He nodded once, almost imperceptible. 2 minutes, he said to Rofi. "No more." They found the uncle half crouched under a sal tree, shirt over his mouth, eyes wild. He had tried to outrun a front that doesn't care about lungs. Together they hauled him up, one on each side. The world staggered. Embers snapped around them like insects with fire for mouths. Then the sound came, the one that doesn't belong to flame. A trumpet, low, resonant, not frantic. A pillar of moving grey stepped out of smoke as if carved from it. An elephant, dusted with ash, ears fanning, eyes clear. Behind him, 2 more shapes. They moved not away from the fire but across its face, as if moving wind with bodies. "Chandra," Anna said, and didn't know she'd said it aloud. The bull regarded the humans with what could only be called irritation, as if they had wandered, once again, into a conversation that wasn't theirs. He swung his trunk and struck a burning branch, sending sparks downwind into already burned ground, safe. The matriarch behind him pushed a sapling aside to open a clearer line. The third elephant, young, formidable, stamped out a creeping edge with calm, deliberate weight. "Elephants are firewise," Arjun would say later, over and over to reporters who wanted magic. "They read wind. They choose ground. They move the problem." Right then, there was no language, only the fact of safety being made. Chandra stepped between the humans and the loudest part of the burn, creating a slipstream of cooler air that felt like a hand on the back. "Go," Rofi said, already dragging the boy's uncle in the direction the bull had insisted upon. They went. At the jeep, the world resumed its smaller size. The cameraman retched politely behind a wheel. The director counted heads with a new shame. Arjun posted 2 rangers to watch the line while the rest ferried volunteers to water and sense. When the wind eased, the fire dropped its shoulders and agreed to be contained. Ash sifted down like a tired snowfall. Somewhere, at the edge of vision, 3 elephants moved along the blackened margin, inspecting the work as if they were supervisors on a night shift. When Chandra lifted his head, Anna felt it like a rope in her chest, pulling from a place without map. That night, the sanctuary became a village of gratitude. Women stirred pots of dal for anyone with a scorched eyebrow. A boy with singed hair told a story to anyone who would listen about how the fire saw the elephant and forgot to be a monster. Old Mr. Holloway, no relation to any of them, but every town has his twin, would have nodded and said, "He's not just an animal. He's one of us." In this town, a different old man limped in on a stick and wept quietly into his tea. The TV crew filed their footage with hands that had learned to shake for better reasons. The director took Anna aside, his voice more honest than she'd ever heard it. "What happened there?" he asked. "We can't script that. We can't sell it. We can only show it." "Then show it," she said. Arjun watched her with a tenderness he did not dramatize. "You remember," he said, not a question. "I never stopped," she answered. "Nor did he," Arjun said. In the days that followed, the Corridor project leapt in public imagination from a footnote to a future. Donations arrived in humble amounts that add up when you put them beside desire. A school class sent drawings of elephants wearing little firefighter helmets, which caused the rangers to dissolve into undignified laughter. A group of farmers from 3 villages volunteered to form a rotating night watch during burn weeks. Someone painted a crescent moon on the side of a water tanker and named it Chandra's Cloud. Anna's crew filmed until the memory cards filled. In the edits, the story refused to be only spectacle. It became what it had always been, a ledger of kindness, entries from humans and elephants, credits and debits, losses and astonishing gains. On her last morning, Anna walked alone to the river's bend where 15 years earlier she had knelt in mud and poured water into a small, searching trunk. The sand was stamped with a fresh print, the edges crisp, the whorls of skin caught like fingerprints. She placed her palm in the hollow where weight had been. It dwarfed her hand and still, somehow, fit. "You kept your promise," she said to the air, unsure whether she meant him or herself. Leaves lifted in a wind she couldn't see. Across the water, bee-eaters skimmed emerald bright. For a moment, the kind that makes people believe in things, the forest opened its throat and spoke in the only language it trusts, the crackle of a kingfisher landing, the tremor of footfalls far off, the elastic silence of creatures agreeing not to startle. Anna turned, and found him there. Not close, not looming. Simply present, halfway between shadow and sun. Chandra's tusks were modest, the way some bulls carry their power quietly. His skin bore the map of his years, scrapes that had healed, a raised seam on the trunk where a poacher's wire had once tried to take his future, the pale crescent on the ear that time had not faded. He stood with one foot slightly forward, listening with his whole body. Anna lifted her hand, palm open. It felt less like an offering now and more like a salute. "Hello again," she said. "Thank you for the fire." He breathed, and she felt it ruffle the small hairs at her wrist. He reached, not to take, but to remember. He touched her fingers, then her forearm, then the coin at her throat, which chimed softly against his skin. He made a low rumble that she felt in her bones, an old-world sound that translates poorly into modern tongues but means something like, "I know." Behind him, a young male peered from behind a teak trunk the way adolescent boys do at dances. The matriarch appeared, flapped an ear in gentle disapproval at the entire species of humans, and allowed the moment anyway. Anna laughed, wet-faced, and whispered the word that had waited 15 years to be said without ache: home. The documentary aired in late autumn. It did the quiet work of good stories. Not outrage alone, not praise alone, but invitation. Viewers funded more chili fences, more grain silos with elephant-proof lids, more community fire trainings. University students wrote theses with titles entirely too long. A poet in Kolkata sent a slim book dedicated to a bull he would never meet. The sanctuary bought another second-hand jeep that started on the 3rd try. Anna returned each season, sometimes officially with a crew, often privately with cheaper luggage and longer stays. She helped build a curriculum for village schools, how to read a forest's mood, how to be big without being loud. She learned the names rangers used, not just bull or cow, but Asha for a matriarch who favored river grapes, Farka for a one-tusked philosopher who stared at moonlight like a critic, Nimbu for a calf who loved sour fruit and squealed when he sneezed. And always, Chandra. Sometimes he vanished for months into ranges that maps refused. He would return like an answered letter, scenting the edges of the corridor, sampling a new salt lick with the discretion of a sommelier. He never performed for her or anyone else. He allowed their paths to cross, and when they did, he acknowledged her with that calm, devastating civility that makes a human stand up straight. The mark on his ear became a kind of seal in the town. Children traced crescents on their notebooks. A sweet shop boxed moon-shaped ladoos for holidays. On the anniversary of the fire containment, families placed a small brass bowl of water beneath their neem trees and told their smallest children a bedtime story about a girl who kept a promise and an elephant who kept one longer. Years led. Arjun retired with a ceremony that made even the teak look sentimental. He moved to a house within walking distance of the river and taught his grandson to carry a stick, mostly for snakes and partly for courage. Rafi married a schoolteacher with eyes like the cool side of a pillow. The corridor filled in, not with straight lines but with living ones. Saplings grown into shade, fences replaced with respect, grudges softened by a story people told each other when tempers rose. Remember the moon-eared bull. Anna kept a room in the stilted hut, a tin box with her name on it for tea and notebooks and strings of marigolds dried to paper. She learned to listen for the infrasonic murmurs that fall under human hearing, felt them as a pressure in the chest when a herd discussed a decision. She learned that fear can be a teacher if you don't let it be a driver. She learned that love, in the field, looks like measured steps and wide margins and the discipline not to put your desire above a wild thing's dignity. On a winter morning 5 years after the fire, Anna walked the river path alone, the air clear as glass. Frost ghosted the grasses. Somewhere a langur scolded the sun for its tardiness. She rounded a bend and found Chandra standing at the water's lip, 1 foot in, steam lifting from his skin like blessings. The crescent on his ear was the palest she had ever seen it, as if the season itself had polished it. A teenage bull shadowed him, trying on swagger like an ill-fitting jacket. Chandra ignored the performance and sipped in a rhythm that matched the slow work of glacier. Anna stood at the respectful distance she had learned. "Hello, old friend," she said. He lifted his head. He stepped once toward her and paused, a question mark drawn in flesh. She raised her hand, palm out. He came the rest of the way and rested the weight of his trunk, briefly, against her shoulder. A gesture so intimate and so careful she would, for years, be unable to describe it without silence. She saw, then, the mark she had once given meaning to a lifetime ago, the crescent, framed by a new scar just above it, thin and pale, where a thorn or human thing had nicked him. Time writes on us all, she thought. The trick is to read and not forget. When he moved away, she felt it like weather changing. She watched him until trees took him apart and put him back together as shadow, then as nothing you could keep. On the 10th anniversary of her first return, a storm caught the lower hills and pinned them like laundry to a line. The river swelled with opinions. A school bus stalled at a low crossing that had never been dangerous until it was. Rangers called. Farmers called. Mothers called. By the time Anna reached the crossing with Rafi and a dozen others, the bus sat at a scornful angle, its wheels kissing air. Children pressed their faces to the glass with the feral calm of the very young who don't yet believe in endings. The current bit at the bus's rear like a bored dog about to escalate. "Ropes," Arjun's successor shouted. "Harness. Anchor to the tamarind." Everyone moved at once. Men wrapped lines around their waists. Women formed a human chain. Rafi waded in until the water punched his ribs, then grinned like a man solving a math problem with his body. Something massive moved upstream, the kind of movement you feel before you see. An elephant appeared at the bend, water muscling past his hips. Another behind him. Another. They came without hurry and without confusion, as if floods were an old acquaintance whose tricks no longer impressed them. Chandra led. He surveyed the crossing with the air of a contractor grimly amused by amateur scaffolding. He waded to the bus's rear quarter and leaned his shoulder against the metal with care a surgeon would envy. The bus slewed, corrected, settled. The driver wept without noise. 2 cows took positions midstream like pillars, breaking the current, making a corridor of calmer water. The youngest bull, swagger finally traded for function, pressed his flank to the side door. A ranger opened it to a chorus of high voices, terror fracturing into thrill. "Slowly," someone shouted, and laughter trembled in the command. One by one, the children crossed that impossible bridge, each small hand guided by a larger one, each foot placed where water agreed to be less wild. They stepped from bus to elephant side to shallows to gravel and ran into the arms of mothers who had grown old in 20 minutes. When the last child reached shore, the elephant stood a moment longer, because dignity finishes last. Then they turned as if they had been asked to run an errand and were returning to a more interesting conversation. Chandra lifted his trunk in a high arc that flung river from his skin and, with it, the morning's fear. Anna could not help it. She laughed aloud, a sound she had learned here, one that didn't ask permission from sorrow to be bright. She met his gaze across a distance that had never stopped being a distance. She lifted her hand. He did not come close. He did not need to. He stood, the crescent on his ear an emblem that meant nothing to the forest and everything to a handful of people, and he rumbled. The ground answered. The tamarind leaves trembled. The children quieted as animals do when a voice older than their parents speaks. Later, when reporters asked what had saved the school children, Anna said, "Preparation, ropes, community, and elephants who read water better than we do." When a blogger begged for magic, she gave them logistics. When a child asked privately if the moon-eared elephant was a guardian spirit, Anna knelt and said, "Yes. He is a guardian spirit with very real feet." Years will continue to add themselves, the way rings add to a tree you never think to measure until you need proof of time. People will move away and return and move away again. Arjun will die, old and easy, and be burned beneath a sal that drops its leaves like prayers. Rafi will teach his daughter to drive the new jeep that starts on the first try. The corridor will widen by the patient inches of laws argued and fences changed and minds unshrunk by story. Chandra will grow heavier in the shoulders and lighter in the step. One day, he will not be there when counted, and the rangers will walk the ranges quiet, listening for a sound they have known longer than their own names. They will find a place under teak where leaves have made a soft bed, and the herd will have already done what herds do. Stood vigil, touched bone with trunk, learned absence as a shape they can carry. When that day comes, the town will place marigolds on the river stones. The school children, no longer children, will take their turn telling a story that never needed embellishment. A bench plaque in the park will grow a second line, he remembered. So do we. Mothers will still set bowls of water beneath their trees in summer. Somewhere, a young bull with a half-moon nick in his ear will pause at a crossing and listen the way his father listened. And Anna, older now, hair threaded with the same silver that rivers wear in winter, will sit on the porch of the stilted hut in evening when the sky is the color of forgiveness. She will touch the coin at her throat and, without ceremony, pour the first cup of her tea into the dust at her feet. She will not say the act aloud. The ground will understand. The forest will make room for the meaning. She will close her eyes and see again a calf near water, a girl with a bottle, a connection made without permission from cynicism. She will hear the low thunder of feet she has loved without ownership. She will lift, by reflex and reverence, her hand, palm open, as always, and in the private theatre behind her eyes, the world will answer. A trunk's warm weight, the whisper of a crescent moon brushing past, and the steady, unfrightened knowledge that promises kept do not end. They widen until other lives can walk across them. And if you ask her, there on that porch with dusk folding its wings, what the story truly is, whether it is about a girl or a sanctuary or a corridor or a town that learned to be softer, she will smile the way people smile when language is too small and say, simply, "It's about recognition." Because that is what happened on a riverbank and a fire line and a flooded road. Two beings saw each other without demand, without debt, and memory, elephant memory, human memory, did what memory is supposed to do. It reached forward. It made room. It kept the way open, like a path through forest, wide enough for a promise to pass, and for all who needed it to follow.